Good morning. Hope y'all are doing well. If someone can just in the chat let me know if you can hear and see me, that would be really helpful because I just want to make sure everything's working correctly. So I want to, first of all, just thank you all for being willing to be here. Okay, awesome. Thank y'all so much. So I just want to, first of all, introduce myself. My name is Dwayne Theobald. I am the coordinator of the University Writing Center here at the University of West Georgia. And I'm also the Georgia State Representative for the Southeastern Writing Center Association. I am really excited about the morning that we have ahead of us, and I'm super excited. We have like 33 people that are on this call, which is amazing. One, because we are in a pandemic and things are really crazy right now, but also it's a Friday morning. So it's really wonderful to see everyone here this morning. A couple of things I wanted to just announce before I hand things over to Christina for our opening session. First of all, while we're in this particular session, please keep your mics muted until we're to the Q&A portion or whatever interactive portions that Christina might have planned. Also, I wanted to clarify how the breakouts are going to work. So all of you, during the course of signing up, put down what your first and second choices would be for your for the breakout sessions. What I'm actually going to be doing is you all have different links for all the breakout sessions. You can choose which two you would prefer to go to. There'll be two different breakout sessions. You can attend whichever topics you would like to attend, and we do have moderators for those groups. So I hope that there'll be great discussion during those. Without further ado, I do want to take an opportunity just to introduce Christina Aikens this morning. I'm very excited that she is here to discuss her work and to kind of share some of her insights with us on this very important topic that the writing center community has been talking about a good bit over the last several years and is becoming more and more important as the months and year moves forward. So just a little bit about Christina. Christina Aikens has been directing the writing tutoring programs at Tufts University since 2010. Her research interests include writing tutor education and mentorship, social justice in the writing center, and creativity in academic disciplinary writing. She received her PhD in English literature from Tufts in 2008. So without further ado, Christina, I'm going to hand things over to you.
Hello. This is a different format for me, so I hope again that you can hear and see me okay. So great. So I'm Christina Aikens. Thank you for inviting me. I'm super excited to be here, and thank you. And very, very excited about the opportunity to be able to connect with folks that I would maybe not be able to ordinarily. It's really exciting, a really exciting benefit of the pandemic, which is obviously overall creating lots and lots of problems. That's beyond an understatement. But the nice thing is that we could all be here when maybe otherwise travel would prevent us from talking to each other. So I'm very excited about that. So I have planned to just kind of talk a little bit about the development of this essay and a couple of the things that have been sort of going around in my mind, and then I really wanted to open it up both for discussion and for reflection in this section. So just to kind of provide a little bit of background on how this article came about. I had been teaching some of the articles from writing centers in the new racism for quite some time, as many people had. But in late 2016, there was a call put out by WLN for a special issue, and at the time, this was called "What We Believe: How We Teach writing tutors." And right away when I read this, I thought, well, what I believe is that we have to prioritize anti-racism in our education programs more than maybe we already are. And, you know, some of that was very personal for me because it was a long-standing growth for myself as an educator to kind of embrace this approach. So I kind of just responded almost on a gut level or almost emotional level to this because you might remember December 2016, and it was a time when I felt moved to do something, and this call just seemed like something that was very important to include in this discussion of tutor education. And as I was doing this, though, I had a lot of concerns. One concern was that, so also, I just want to kind of put out there that I'm going to try as much as possible to be like sort of vulnerable in this session. And I hope that that is something that people can respond to and like feel as though they can also be, you know, vulnerable. In the article, I tried to also sort of, as much as possible, explain where I was coming from and the vulnerability I feel about this topic, because I don't really consider myself an expert, and I was trying as much as possible to elevate those experts that I was learning from. This was also coming from a place of a sort of feeling of responsibility, because I had recently read the study of writing center administrators that had been done. And while I don't know if this was a completely accurate portrayal of writing centers in the United States, the findings were that writing center administrators identified as white 91%, which is a huge majority. So I was attempting in this article to sort of respond to the call of white people talking to other white people about race. This was really something that is underlying this article. So I just want to put that out there because I know that there are people in this session today who don't identify as white, and there are many, many, many writers who have written much better articles than this about anti-racism in the writing center who are not white. And I just wanted to kind of put that out there as like, this is my attempt to have that conversation and to try to respond to this idea of contributing to this topic in a way that I didn't want to move any awareness away from writers of color. I wanted to try to open up the space so that I could speak to a kind of a specific audience in that way. That being said, of course, it's on the internet, so you know, the audience is everyone, but I just wanted to kind of put that out there as something that I was thinking about. The other thing that was really challenging when I was thinking about this, and this was one of the hardest essays that I've ever written, both because I was trying to communicate so much, but also because it was actually very difficult to figure out what exactly I wanted to convey in the essay when there had been other things written already about anti-racism in the writing centers in general. I was trying to focus on tutor education. But of course, all of those other essays are in some way addressing that as well. But the other thing that really was challenging was that at the moment where I first wrote this, and then in the in the subsequent months where our political situation in America was becoming so dire, and you know, every time that I was asked for another revision, it felt like thinking about the language that we use simultaneously felt incredibly important and, you know, crucial, because language was really coming up a lot in a lot of the political you know, the stories, the news stories that were coming out, but also pales in comparison to actual physical violence, to be perfectly frank. Like, I was just like, is this I was struggling with the how to feel connected to this topic in a way that felt both meaningful and important, but also not overstating the importance of it, because I have a lot of luxuries in my life. Not only do I have a lot of privilege, including white privilege, but I also teach at a school that is a school with a lot of resources. So I was struggling with that aspect a lot too, but ultimately trying to come around to the idea that every contribution that we can make is important to, you know, to trying to address racism in the United States. So I was trying to focus as much as possible on the things that I knew, understand, and could contribute to. So the experience of writing this was a great big learning experience for me. It went through a lot of different revisions. It had a completely different focus at one point. There's an appendix to the essay that talks about surveys I did of the writing tutors, and using that as a way of sort of gauging how well the tutors are sort of responding to the topics that you are bringing up. And that was the main point of the article at one point. So it really went through a lot of different revisions. And ultimately, it's an attempt to try, particularly to address those of us who did not get a degree in comp ret, or who did so, you know, earlier on and did not have the benefit of having some of these ideas brought to our attention in our own training and education. I also wanted to kind of just bring out a few themes. So one of them is that I try to separate out, because I, again, have both the luxury and maybe the burden of having two different kinds of programs, and many of you also have this sort of thing. So I have undergraduates who take a class with me, and then I have grad students who only have a sort of 20-hour, 25-hour training before we begin, and kind of talking about those aspects of it, and really thinking about what Rasha Daib says in talking about how we need to make conversations about race integral to what we're doing, so that it doesn't feel like an add-on or something that we don't have time for, but really sort of trying to make sure that we are, even if we have a short period of time, having these conversations about race. And I just wanted to, at this point, recognize one of our here in the room, Mandy Sursitsma. I apologize if I have said your name wrong. If you want to correct me, I will take your correction, Mandy. And Sean Estelle Brown, who wrote Theory into Practice. Sursitsma. So thank you so much. And this essay is about a process of developing heuristics around addressing oppressive language in the Writing Center. This essay, I really would love to hear more from you, because this essay has become really foundational for my tutor education programs, and all of my tutors read this, and I feel like it does a great job of sort of marrying this idea of having conversations about race and racial injustice with just good tutoring practices. So this feels like a great example of what we're trying to do here, is to put these two things together, not separate them or make them seem like two different things. So lastly, I'll just say too, and then I want to turn it over to Q&A, that the question of empathy comes up a lot. I didn't really expect it to come up quite as much, but every time that we have these conversations in my own writing center, when I talk with both grad students and undergrads, the question keeps coming back of, well, what about faculty? So their feeling is that they don't have any power or say over how language and our use of it and our backgrounds with writing, they feel like they don't have any say in how faculty judge this. And that's something that I kind of wanted to put out to the group, because I'm struggling with it a lot. I feel as though our writing center could do more to raise awareness, and that's a project that we're working on this year, among faculty about how they respond to writing. But at the same time, I kind of bristle when they say they don't have any say over this or they don't have any power, because I think that working with a writing tutor and developing your writing with someone who has an understanding of these concepts and who can really help you to develop your voice is super meaningful and powerful. So I guess, like I said, I sort of bristle at this idea that only faculty have any kind of say or power over this question. I myself am not faculty, and I know some people in the room are, so I don't mean to say I'm not talking about Writing Center faculty, and probably Comp Ret faculty, although maybe, but really like the university in general. So those are the remarks that I kind of wanted to put out there as some ideas to kind of discuss. And I was wondering if we could just open it up for conversation. It's a little bit hard to do that in Zoom, but I'd like to hear any questions or things that people would like to talk about. So Levin has, yes, great.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for this. Thanks for the article. So I'm with Mandy at Emory. She's my colleague. So thank you for reminding us of her article. But actually, I was wondering something else about what you said in the last couple of minutes in terms of power dynamics and in terms of faculty-student interaction. We have a lot of international students from China especially, and our students, and I would think these students, and maybe the tutors too, are maybe less inclined to push against faculty and maybe less inclined to use kind of their own voice and to use kind of their own language, because when they do so, it's not considered code meshing from their angle, right, from their perspective. And I'm myself a non-native speaker of English, so whenever I make a mistake maybe in English, or whenever I use my own language, it wouldn't be considered code meshing. I would feel it would be considered wrong English, right? And I think a lot of international students would struggle with that too. And I think the tutors that work with these students also would struggle to tell them, hey, it's okay to use your own voice. It's okay to use your own language. I think you mentioned in your article Hindi and Spanish, or other languages that your tutors have used in these discussion posts, responding to an article, I think, by Rashan Ashanti Young. So I'm wondering whether you can speak of maybe international students potentially pushing back against that, and tutors having to deal with that idea, and maybe being able to convince them it's okay to write wrong English. It's okay to write in standard academic English.
Yeah, I'd again love to hear what other people say as well. My response is twofold and probably always is multifold whenever I think about these things. One would be that, sometimes students are like, tutors kind of interpret what we're talking about as being something where they're almost pushing the student toward in a certain direction, and I guess that I weigh that. For me, I try to think of this as much as possible as negotiating a balance between what the writer wants their voice to sound like, and raising awareness about how that might be expanded, right? So certainly many, particularly international students and multilingual students, I know what you're saying, because many of them sort of express a desire to sort of speak like a native speaker, and that feels like a desire that is both somewhat misplaced and also hard to ignore, right? You don't want to make someone feel like they're wrong to feel that way, or that the stakes are not high for them, because they are really high, both in terms of their grades, but also just sort of the feeling that they have about their writing. So I guess I would encourage a tutor to think about trying to hold, as hard as it is, multiple ideas in their head at the same time, and to kind of approach it in a way where maybe they are trying to tease out what it is that the student really wants their voice to sound like, and also talking with them a little bit about how this is a culturally constructed situation. We are in an American academy, and so of course, I understand wanting to sound a certain way, but at the same time, the whole world full of English speakers, and not all of them are American or, you know, native speakers of English. So I would love to see more variety in the language rather than trying to conform to one narrow way of thinking about it. Thank you for your question. I'm sorry that
Okay,
if the moderators can help me a little bit, I'm sorry.
no, you're good. You're good. So we had a couple of hands raised. The first one is Kamal, I believe is how I'm saying that. So Kamal, if you want to go ahead, and then we'll go to the next two after that.
Thank you very much. Good morning. I hope you can hear and see me. Thank you, Professor, for the article and then the brief summary you mentioned. I would like to have this comment slash question for you, especially about the first item that you talk about, the recognizing the academic language is race, class, and privileged. So that language disadvantages low-income students of color and also multilingual students. And I'm also originally an international student, and right now I'm doing my PhD in sociology at Emory. And my question is, for example, I've never learned English until high school back in Turkey. I'm originally from Turkey. And when I learned it, the Turks are kind of grammar obsessed, and they want to make sure that even if they can speak properly, they need to speak with a picture perfect grammar, so to say. But on the other hand, you mentioned that it is important to recognize the differences when a student comes from a low income background or financially disadvantaged background. And also, on the other hand, we know that in some cultural capital theories, certain students who are coming from low income background, over time, they bridge that gap at school. So how are we gonna make this, find the balance between the students who still need to learn the proper grammar, and then at the same time providing the cosmopolitan or diverse narratives and rhetorics without putting them in a kind of dire situation. So how are we going to establish this balance? Because even if we agree with certain standards, their professors might not, or in the future their potential employers might not. So we also need to make sure that these students who are coming from certain disadvantaged backgrounds, we also need to make sure that they are ready for future. But at the same time, we shouldn't also discriminate them. We should accept their linguistics background or other background. So how is the delicate balance between the two? Thank you.
Yes. Well, so a couple of things. I want to draw attention to the chat so that you can, so that people can have a follow-up as well to this question, to some of these questions, but also. So again, I can never just answer straightforwardly. I'm thinking about a couple of things at once. So one thing that I'm trying to do is a sort of channel Varshana Shanti Young for a moment, a little bit, and push back just a bit on this idea that advancement depends on speaking and writing in standard American English, because he points out a couple of things. One is that actually, particularly, not just students of color, but particularly Black students, are often subject to racism and prejudice and bias against their language, even if they're using American English. So, you know, there are studies that have been done about sort of assumptions that and biases that people have in responding to the difference between. So there's, you know, they can be shown a video of two different people speaking, and students who watch this video will automatically assume certain things about the speaker, even if the language used is precisely the same. So there are many discussions about this, and studies shown that while we think that speaking and writing in standard American English will sort of eliminate this problem of bias against the speaker or writer, it's actually not true when you look at the psychological research. But the other aspect of this is that it also assumes, and this is really the part where I'm trying to channel Dr. Young, who in the session that I went to with him many years ago, asked the audience to consider whether maybe they are making assumptions about the business world that they are not actually correct about. That maybe in fact there is more diversity and variety in the corporate world than academia expects there to be, and that perhaps it's academia that has in fact been more restrictive in this area than in other areas. So those are the kind of two answers that I would give about that. Again, I would love to hear from others in the chat or elsewhere about how they would respond to this question.
Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm. I also just want to say one other thing, which is that sort of since the first two questions were about multilingual writers, I just wanted to acknowledge that I have spoken to just as many students who are so dismayed at having their writing redlined, basically edited for them. And what I mean when I say they were dismayed, I don't mean that they were like feeling bad. I mean, they were feeling bad about that experience, but it was really frustrating to them in the sense that they felt like they weren't being heard. And so when we only focus on style or grammar to the detriment of trying to listen to what the person is saying, I think that that's really damaging. So just wanted to kind of say that as well.
Okay, so we've had a couple of people raise their hands. There's also active conversation in the chat, which is fantastic. Sharon, you had your hand raised for a bit, and I think it went away. So if you have a question, feel free to chime in.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes.
Awesome. Okay, so this may be sort of covering a little territory we already have, but I meant it in I kind of came at it from your article. One thing that I thought was really interesting in your article is talking about prioritizing this sort of training, not making it in terms of, you know, here we do the whole semester, and oh, by the way, here's one more thing. but making it sort of more integral. And you mention that a lot of the techniques that are sort of foundational for writing center work, like active listening and collaboration, a lot of these come from feminist theory, right? And so that is, it's not just something that we're conscious of, it's something that you kind of almost can't avoid, that sort of feminist theory part of the writing center, right? That those sort of techniques are sort of built into who we are. And so I'm kind of wondering, and this probably shows my ignorance, but I'm kind of wondering if, as we move forward with the anti-racism, are there techniques, sort of like appreciating the different language, but are there other techniques that come from that we can sort of integrate into our regular practice rather than thinking about being an add-on in terms of content or language?
So thinking about how we can bring in, I'm sorry, could you?
Yes, it may not be really formulated. Well, I just, one of the things that your article encourages us to do is make the anti-racism integral. And you sort of suggest that whether we are aware of it or not, a lot of sort of the feminist foundational techniques, the things that came out of feminist theory, like collaboration, active listening, all these sorts of things are sort of at the heart of what we do at the Writing Center. They're not just policy, they're also procedure. Mm-hmm. And so part of what we've been talking about respecting different languages is one way we could do that, right? But are there other sort of procedural ways of operation that comes out of anti-racism that we can incorporate into our practice so it doesn't feel like an overlay but feels like part of it?
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I think that one thing that I considered a little bit right before this session began was how, I was sort of reading the article and thinking about how I approached it through the idea of tutor education, and how since this was published, I've reconsidered what tutor education means. So I was really thinking about my training course and the workshops that we do with grad students beforehand. But then over the summer, I was approached by a couple of the writing fellows who were so, this summer was again a time when I had this same feeling, like, is language the important thing when people are dying, right? And so I was slightly surprised, but also not at all surprised when a couple of the writing fellows wrote to me after the murder of George Floyd and wanted to know how we could raise more awareness about the things that we had been talking about in class, and how we could not just keep it confined to the class, but reach out more. So I had already been working on our mission statement. There have been lots of people writing in the Writing Center world about revising mission statements to address these issues of becoming more inclusive and more open about language. So we also were putting together some position statements for our website to try to make public some of the work that we were doing. So I guess my response is that I would think about ways that you can not keep, and for some of you, this is maybe sort of obvious in the sense that you can't like sort of hide what it is that you're doing. Not that I was saying on purpose to hide it, but it did feel like it was like amongst the group that I was working with. And so I guess I would say that one thing to think about is how you can expand your notion of how the tutors are educated and how they are educating you and contributing back to the program and to the overall message that you want to have with your programs.
Thank you. I appreciate that answer. As you're talking, I'm realizing that probably some of this is biased based on the kind of training we're able to do in our writing center, because we don't have a semester-long course that people take when they're doing it. In fact, we have maybe a day of orientation, and it's a lot of learning it's a lot of learning on the job. Mm-hmm. And so I guess for me, thinking about ways that I can incorporate that into what the tutors are going to do, rather than asking them. Most of my tutors are volunteers. They're not paid. And so bless their hearts, they're busy students with families. They don't have time to read a lot of extra things. So things that I can incorporate in for them to do are probably more realistic ways of us sort of handling that rather than offering more articles to read. So that's probably kind of the back of what I'm thinking through for myself. So thank you.
Yeah, I think so too. That I'm trying also to keep reminding myself as I talk about this that not everyone does have a class, and so one thing that you could maybe think about is how you might use sample papers to open up these discussions, and how you might yourself sort of prepare for these conversations in your training session. So maybe instead of having them read the whole article, recommend the article and then summarize the article for them, point out a few things, and then give them a sample paper to work on. That might be one way of approaching this.
That's a really good idea. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Okay, Brittany, you had your hand up?
Yes, can everybody hear me? We're good? Okay, so to actually go off of what was just being said, maybe I was just a helper. I had no hand in putting this together at all. My counterpart, Nicole Turner, and our amazing tutor, Anastasia Latson, they came up with a discussion for biases and racism that can happen in tutoring sessions, predominantly within academia. And I was just a person who was told to show up and have a discussion. So they're the brains behind the operation. What we did was everyone read the paper, all three of us together, and then we had a three-way conversation over Zoom, and we recorded it. Then what we did was send the articles to our tutors to read, and then they can view the video if they wanted to see our responses and how we had that conversation, since we can't have our conversations the way we normally would. And we had a very generative discussion about how, particularly at Georgia State University, we service students who are from lower income backgrounds, predominantly students of color, and I have on more than one occasion have been asked to line edit a paper because a student wants to sound more American. So it's, for me, this is coming from a white privileged person's perspective. For me, it's about the act of rhetorically listening, letting the students say what they need, and go ahead and let them vocalize what they are seeking out, and then having a discussion around that, and not trying to force a particular idea onto them, because typically students either resist it or they follow it, which could be also worse depending on what they're trying to accomplish. And allowing the student themselves to vocalize what they need to say and allowing that conversation to occur, instead of just saying, this is what you need to do in order to, this is how we get to point B from where you're at right now. And if a student wants to have conversations about grammar, awesome, we can talk about grammar and how grammar rules don't really apply to 90% of things, and that's completely okay. But then we can also have discussions of, okay, we need to put punctuation here and here in order to convey this type of message. But if that's not the message you want to convey, we can also go this route, because language is fluid and it's flexible. And I feel that, in my experience, students have an understanding of that. It can be frustrating, and that's where their frustration comes from. They're not able to, not able, the resistance and pushing them to sound a certain way is what's causing more frustration, because they want to achieve a certain thing, but language is so fluid they can't control it, and that's difficult. And understanding that we ourselves, or maybe I'm just speaking for myself as a grad student, we are still novice writers because we will always be learning something new. If we get to the point that we are not learning anything new, then you are an excellent writer, fantastic. But for the rest, for everyone else, that's not really the case. And being okay with your own novice situation, and understanding that just because another student is also a novice and maybe not at the same language level doesn't really mean a whole lot, because it's still about communication and being flexible and being fluid, being as fluid as the language itself in the tutoring practice. Sorry, I just wanted to get that out there.
Yeah, I entirely agree. You know, it's really hard to be a student. This is kind of oversimplifying it in a way, but I mean, you're always striving to get positive feedback, and it is difficult to negotiate your own feelings about wanting to be sort of accepted, and wanting to also be genuine and authentic to yourself. And so I agree completely with your comments, Brittany, and your way of thinking about how you can better sort of draw out the writer to sort of express what it is that they're trying to do with the writing, and maybe feel a little bit more like they have a say in this, right?
I just brought up one more thing. I'm sorry. Also, Dwayne, Anastasia is amazing. She really is. And one thing Nicole and I prioritized when we were discussing orientation, even though it was really Nicole's brainchild, we made sure to, one, Anastasia is a person of color. She's a woman of color. We wanted to prioritize having that voice, having very strong control over the conversation, for one. And two, we made sure to, I understand a lot of centers don't have this option. We made sure that we paid her for the labor she put into it, because a lot of graduate labor, not just graduate labor, a lot of labor, particularly performed, and emotional labor, performed by women of color, is never compensated. So we wanted to make sure that that was always on the table before we even told her, asked her if she wanted to do it. So just want to make sure that that is a thought if we ask for labor, especially being an AD and she's a tutor, making sure that she is compensated fairly, and also having autonomy over the discussion, because it is a discussion that is geared towards, one, her area of expertise in all ways, and two, it's really about us, Nicole and I are white women, us being quiet and allowing her to lead the discussion itself, because it wasn't about us. So, yeah.
I could not possibly agree with you more with the compensation, whatever your writing center is able to do. So, yes.
All right, Val, you have your hand up. You can go ahead.
Oh my gosh. Hi, can you see me? Okay. Hi, my name is Val, and I'm an undergraduate tutor at Emory, currently a sophomore. And I'm majoring in creative writing, so I do quite a bit of writing that is like unconventional for academia, I guess. And I think it's very easy for me to slip in and code mesh and do whatever the heck I want when I'm writing like creatively, because there's like not really any rules that creative writing professors usually give you for workshops. But I find it so hard in like I guess there's just this challenge when I want to like express myself in the same way in any other class because there's just that already like really large expectation that you don't and you follow the 5 paragraph format and you use SAE. And so I was wondering what are your opinions or anything that you've thought like brainstormed as to like how to indoctrinate like this form of code meshing into classes that are more strictly like very formal or like usually use SAE in their essays. Um, I'm also thinking about maybe some outdated practices that we used to use even in creative writing um, that kind of otherize foreign languages that aren't English, maybe like uh, I was talking about this with some of the people at my writing center, like italicizing words in books when they're not in English. And I used to do that. Like when I would write, I would italicize words in Spanish, and my professor was like, "Why are you italicizing this?" And I was like, "It's in Spanish." And she was like, "Okay, that doesn't make it less like why." She was like, "You don't have to make it stand out against other words if you don't want to." So kind of like that unlearning and unlearning malpractices while also learning like newer, better practices. I was wondering what are some of your suggestions or, um, you know, improvements to that kind of system?
Yeah, you're asking a big question, of course, because some of it does have to do with, what has been kind of discussed also in the chat about trying to talk with more faculty about the possibility of opening up um, academic writing to different styles because, often I hear this as well from tutors that they feel comfortable with this in creative writing, not in academic writing. In fact, my PhD is in English literature, and I would say that the English department has the same attitude. It's fine in creative writing, but you can't do it in academic writing, and it's just not true because there's actually a lot of examples of people doing this in academic writing. So I would say that, like in the bigger picture, we as Writing Center people can, all contribute to trying to raise awareness about how there could be, and showing, learning about examples and showing examples of how academic writing can accommodate this, this more expansive style, right? And normalizing that. But also just on a personal level, I would say, if you feel like you would like to write in certain ways that don't appear to be acceptable in that class, that you might just reach out and talk to the professor if you feel like doing that. So yes, there's in the chat, some examples, but for sure, there are many, many, many examples of academic writing that code meshes. So I would look for those and draw people's attention to them. The last thing I would just say is that I have recently been reading a lot about that italicizing thing. It's becoming particularly a thing in cookbooks. I've noticed that cookbook writers are talking about this a lot right now. So if you like cooking, check that out too.
That's so interesting. Thank you.
All right, and then our last hand that's up is Mandy. Mandy, if you want to go ahead.
Hi, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
I'm going to assume you can hear me.
Yeah.
So thank you for this, and thank you for all my tutors who are asking good questions. I was, and others of course too, I just have a very specific question for you, Christina. You say in the article, you know, we've been talking a lot about the complexities of supporting linguistic diversity and code meshing and all the power dynamics at play in that, and the ongoing debate, I think including among folks who work at HBCUs, who we hear a lot from when we have our regional meetings about, you know, whether SAE is like necessary for empowering folks, whether and when code meshing is appropriate, respected, a way to get ahead, that kind of thing. Anyway, so I like that you get at the messiness and complexity of that a bit, and talk about your own struggle and your tutor's struggle navigating those questions as you're supporting students and also, you know, doing advocacy with faculty. And one of the things you say that stood out to me as unique was that you say one of the reasons why you want to introduce students to these debates and issues is because you have a lot of tutors who go into the field of education or policy work. And so you want them to be able as tutors to push boundaries, you know, currently, but also when they go out into the world in those teaching and policy fields. So I was just wondering if you have any like specific examples of alum, you know, who've worked in your center and like how they've put this knowledge to work later in their professional lives or community work or anything like that?
Yeah, thank you for that question. That's very thought-provoking. Yes, so I am not sure if it was solely because of you know, what we talked about in the Writing Center, but I do have alum who have come back to talk with me about how they were pushing these boundaries. So a lot of students over the summer, a lot of alum were reaching out about, this is slightly tangential, but going back to their high schools and so this wasn't really a professional situation. It was actually just like going back to their high schools and talking about the racism that was inherent in their high school curricula or in their high school experience just on a personal level. A lot of students were called to do that and to try to transform their earlier educational experiences. I also have a wonderful, amazing former writing fellow who has developed an education program that focuses on coding for young people of color. So and he uses pedagogy of the oppressed as sort of his approach to talking about coding, which felt like the most thing that I've ever heard, you know, and thinking about the ways that even so-called truly neutral language, like a coding language, you know, maybe the language itself is even a complicated thing to think about, but certainly the way that we approach teaching computer science or engaging in the ideas of computer science can be complicated in this way as well. I've also had many people who have gone into service types of positions. So, for example, Peace Corps and other kinds of programs where they were really using a lot of the person-centered or writer-focused types of approaches that we have to draw out and really focus on the language and culture of the folks that they were working with. And then I would also say that I do have a lot of, teachers who have gone out into the world and they report back that it sort of changes the way that approach teaching writing and speaking in their classes. So I hope that that's specific enough, but yeah, I do think that I think it matters. I mean, I always try to caution myself and others against like only looking towards the future, because we also have to look at our present, right? And we have to change things now. But I do think that I really believe that this is something that is important, because we have the ability to change the minds of future educators.
Okay, I hate to cut off conversation, but I do want to make sure we have time for breakout sessions. Thank you all for this great conversation. Thank you, Christina, for leading this great discussion. Thank you for the outstanding work you're doing. It's very important and important across the board in what we do within our centers. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to enter in the session topics with the links. Hopefully they'll work right. And again, like I mentioned, the way that the breakout sessions can work, of the 3 topics that are provided, you can choose 2 of them. The first session will be roughly now to about 10:40, and then we'll switch and you can go into the next room from about 10:45 to about 11:25, 11:30, and then we'll come back in here at this link around 11:30 to 12 to have closing discussion for the day. And also, all of you that are here right now have been entered in for our prizes and giveaways. There's going to be a couple of books that we're giving away and some Starbucks gift cards. So we will do that during the 11:30 to noon session. So again, thank you so much, Christina, for your time. Thank you all for your wonderful conversations. Go forth and continue discussing in your breakout sessions. Thank you.
Sorry, Dwayne, can you just clarify where we go when and where we're supposed to come back to?
So for the breakout sessions, there's 3 different links. I sent this out over email, but there's 3 different links that are actually in the chat. For some reason, it looks like the second part of the link didn't actually become a link. I don't know why. But you can choose 2 of those topics. You can go to one in the first session and another in the second session. So essentially, of the 3, you can attend 2 of the 3 in the next 2 sessions. So the first session will be now to around 10:40, and then the second one will be 10:45 to around 11:25. So again, choose whichever session, whichever topic interests you.
Thank you. Also, I assume that the chat will be available afterwards. Okay.
Yes, everything's being recorded. So.
Great.